Hello, dears, this is the StorySculpt channel and you are listening to a story, The Sin of Innocence, written by Umme Umara and translated by Samina Rahman, from the book KAHANI Short Stories, by Pakistani Women, edited by Aamer Hussein. It was a frosty winter morning. When she opened her eyes, the train had halted somewhere and the shouts of the coolies and the sleepy voices of the vendors came from afar. She quietly raised the window and peeped out. They were at a large railway junction. A blast of chilly air made her shiver. Hastily rolling the window down, she lay on the berth, willing herself to go back to sleep. "Don't go to sleep. We've arrived." Amma softly caressed her hair. This was her first experience of a long train journey. Before this, all journeys were associated with Baba. He labored in faraway lands and running the home was Amma's responsibility. Amma, his better half, proved to be so in all areas of endeavor. The children were studying in the best schools, the lands were being diligently looked after, relatives and dear ones were being attended to, and nobody had occasion to complain. Baba being away from home, Amma dealt with the children so that they would not miss his presence at all. She gave them so much love that, drunk on its excess, they would obey her every command, believing in the paradise that lay beneath her feet. Living their lives in ease and without a conscious plan, they had set a future course for themselves on the road to progress. When, in a year's time, Baba returned home from his foreign travels and journeys in strange lands and found his garden of delight flourishing, he would be beside himself with joy. They all loved Baba. His presence added to their happiness, but at the same time they were afraid of him. When he was around, Amma would move about replete within herself. She would discuss everything on earth with him, from the family to the neighbors, and Baba, too, never tired of listening to her. She would bestow her advice on Baba at every step and he would value it. It was often seen that when Baba was struggling with a problem and his own reason was proving unequal to the task, Amma would offer her services and Baba, shifting his responsibility onto her, would settle back with a sigh of relief. Amma was the all-knowing intelligence and he had faith that she could never fail. There was no doubt that Amma was a formidable lady and the entire family trusted her farsightedness. Yet when Baba returned from Bengal and announced his decision, Amma lost her nerve and all her headiness vanished. She would look worriedly about her eyes probing the very threshold and walls of the Haveli, her hands caressing each brick as if it were the form of a loved one, or then she would round on Baba in angry dispute. She would try and convince him with her arguments, but this time Baba was not in the least impressed with her farsightedness. He would keep hammering on at the same point, that they could no longer live there. He could not remit money from where he lived, and if money could not be remitted, then how were the children to be educated, and children without learning are of no use, like unfashioned wood. Most important of all, he could not see any future for his children here, and the children were the sum of his life. Their well-being was his happiness. Then what about this Haveli, these lands, our village and our people? Amma would ask in broken tones and her voice would be swept away in a stream of tears. She would be separated from all her brothers and sisters. Why don't you understand? Nothing is possible here anymore. These children are all we possess. Even if you desire it, there is no space for them here. You will earn nothing from these lands. It's a question of a foreign country and we cannot live here anymore. For the first, and perhaps last time, Amma had to face defeat. Then they watched her sadly pack and put away her things and a storm of tears would rise in her eyes over trifling matters. Seeing Amma's restlessness, Baba would also be agitated, but she was waging an unsuccessful struggle to understand his words. How did one's own home turn into a foreign land? This Haveli, its threshold and walls, its spacious courtyard, which tired one to cross it from one end to the other, the sturdy neem and peepal trees under whose shade marbles are played, and these 3 large open rooms, Amma's pride and joy, were places where they had lived since they had first opened their eyes. She would always say, "My bridal palanquin came through the large gate and was placed right here, and, God willing, my bier will also leave through the same large gate." Every happily married woman cherishes this desire. And now it was the same Amma, the same house, the same village. Then how did this world turn into a world of strangers? And the place where Baba lives, that unseen world, how has it become our country? She would turn it over endlessly in her mind but was still not able to make head or tail of it. The far end of the skein would remain as tangled as ever, and having tired herself out she would listlessly creep away to sleep long hours in the loft. The other brothers and sisters would dream of a bright future as they packed and chattered and made plans for a happy tomorrow. Nobody gave her a thought and she would comfortably turn, rub her eyes and continue sleeping, when suddenly Amma would be reminded of her and then everything would be turned upside down. A search would be conducted from one corner of the house to all the neighboring homes, and when everyone was exhausted, Amma, in her anxiety, would remember the loft and exclaim that Money Rani must be in her little haven. And then Bade Baya or Amma would fetch her from there. In those days when everyone was worrying about the other, she was only concerned whether there would be a loft in Baba's house, and when Baba came she had repeatedly asked him whether the house they were going to had a loft or not. Instead of answering, Baba would smile. Why does Baba fob her off with a smile instead of answering her question? There was definitely no such thing as a loft there. If there was none, then what kind of a house would it be? And how would all their belongings find a home? Thinking and struggling to draw answers from within herself, the days went by one, and swallowing her tears she went on with packing. Then one day they all stood on the platform waiting for the train to carry them from the foreign land to their own country, and after a long journey of 2 days and 2 nights, she was standing on this huge platform. The coolies had started their jostling. Bade Baya, in a responsible manner, was helping the orderly to get the luggage organized. It wasn't as if they were traveling light. Amma appeared to have carried the whole house with her. The luggage finally collected, their little cavalcade was ready to start. But she was freezing. The chill December wind had turned her feet to stone, and it was difficult for her to take 2 steps. Bade Baya, please hire a rickshaw, I can't walk. Where would one find a rickshaw here, Bibi? A tum-tum is available, though, a coolie said in passing. So let's take a taxi. What do you think, Bade Baya? She didn't fancy a tum-tum. Really, child? There isn't even a rickshaw here and you're asking for a taxi? The orderly had been listening to her conversation. Then how will I walk? My feet are numb. She looked helplessly at Bade Baya. Come, little one, I'll pick you up, he said, gathering her in his arms. Hush. Do you think I'm a child? She wiggled out of Bade Baya's arms. Ever since her eldest sister had been married, she had become very conscious of her years. Whenever someone dismissed her as a child, her reaction would be extreme and she would try to impress her adult status on them. Then, child, I suggest you take quicker strides. See, like I do. Then you won't feel cold. The orderly walked past her rapidly. Bade Baya followed suit. Trying to keep up, she also quickened her pace and stepped off the platform onto a gravel road. Its crunch underfoot jolted her. Why had Baba lied? He had said that the roads here were so lovely and shining that a person could even see their face in them. How was she to know that love transmutes dirt into gold and transforms a stone into a mirror? How Baba loved this soil, but this was something she was not aware of till much later. She had contented herself then with the observation that Baba could also lie on occasion, and this revelation had been chalked up to experience and nothing else. Hurrying down the road, she had loved its gravelly sensation. That frost-wrapped winter morning still glowed in the recesses of her memory. What new experiences she'd had that morning! Walking on the road had brought a strange sense of freedom. In her village they were carried about in a palanquin, and there was not the claustrophobic rush of rickshaws here either. Going down the gravel road that morning she had experienced a rush of happiness, timeless in quality, that was still alive within her. The gentle mist, the damp smell of earth, the feel of dew on the feet and the slippery crunch of gravel underfoot. All of this was completely new for her and full of exciting smells, and when, her heart welling with happiness, she had arrived at the place where their small cavalcade had stopped and the coolies were laying down their loads, she had seen Baba. All wrapped up in a Kashmiri shawl, his tall presence loomed magnetically before her. Baba, it's me. She clung to him. My daughter. Baba bent to kiss her. Where have you left Amma and your other brothers and sisters? They're all behind. Only I ran to reach you. She panted happily, looking all around. Baba got busy talking to Bade Baya and issuing instructions to the orderly about the luggage. She examined the house she was standing in front of carefully. This was a new type of house. Tall and with a large compound, it was surrounded by verandas in front and at the back and had nothing like a courtyard around. The entire compound had been enclosed with a prickly barbed wire fence. This was their house. How different it was from their haveli. Their haveli had an immense courtyard, and in it had stood neem and peepal trees, and such lovely guava trees as well, and here along with the sturdy mango, jamun and jackfruit, the tall coconut and betelnut trees swayed overhead. The damp fragrance of earth pervaded the humid air as she looked, in the shivering electric light, at the house which was now her abode. That was a haveli, and this was bungalow no. T/80. She took a deep breath and her mind filled with the familiar scent of Harsinghar. Baba, Baba. She ran to him as he stood, deep in conversation with Amma, his arms around Chot Baya. Baba, look here as well, I mean there's that lovely scent here too, she said happily. Yes, child. This is the scent of the Harsinghar. Here they also call it Shiali. Shiali or Harsinghar or Shiali, what difference does it make? The story of the journey from Harsinghar to Shiali is a long one. She asked her father countless times, why Shiali? Why not Harsinghar? Because, my child, here, in this part of your land, Harsinghar is Shiali. Bade Baya chipped in. And because you have to live and die in this land, therefore you will have to accustom yourself to calling it Shiali and not Harsinghar. That was your past and this is your present, and only if you live in the present will you be able to build a promising future for yourself. So, money child, my advice to you is to give more importance to your future than to the past. Listen, Bade Baya, I don't agree with you. Tell me, how is it possible to build a relationship with the future or dream dreams of a bright tomorrow by forgetting the past? When one has no memory of the past, how can one love the present and forget it? Your mind is filled with straw. Actually, you're prejudiced. Bade Baya, my not speaking Bangla is not such a crime that you should accuse me of prejudice. I just can't break the habit of speaking my own language. What do you mean? I haven't understood. I mean, my dear Bade Baya, that when I can get by through speaking my own language, why should I commit the sin of distorting another perfectly good language by speaking it incorrectly? Don't you agree, Baba? It's not in me to speak a language incorrectly, she laughed. And since when has English become your mother tongue, that you are pursuing it with a vengeance? Bade Baya was peeved. You're always showing off, even if you don't know the first thing about it. God forbid that English should be my language, and the only reason I'm pursuing it is that people like you may not brand me as ignorant. And as far as speaking it incorrectly goes, I have no qualms about ruining it. It's not a sign of our emancipation, but a token of our servitude, and obviously one does not love such tokens. Understood, Bade Baya? She looked at him ironically. Not to learn the language of the place one lives in, that's unfair. Who's refusing to learn it? I'm just not interested in speaking it like an ignoramus. And why have I started to speak correct Urdu then? Paki intervened. That's because Urdu is my language, chirped Bade Baya. You're laboring under a misapprehension. Paki smiled at Bade Baya. Deny, if you can, that Urdu is the language of love. Bade Baya smiled back. As far as money Bidya is concerned, is our language even worse than English, so that she will pile sins on herself if she speaks it? Paki had taken her words amiss. Oh no, Paki. Who said that? Not at all. Your language is the largesse that freedom bestowed on us, otherwise how removed we would have been from it. It's as dear to us as our own mother tongue, she tried to make amends. And me? It's another matter for you, Paki Rani. Have I, like you, exchanged vows of love? She laughed. This is wrong, money child. You don't praise her for her courage, but turn around and make fun of her. You are there to praise her. The whole business of praise stretched to such lengths that quite unobtrusively, both pronunciation and language changed, from Pakaz to Ferni and from Ferni to Ferni. From Sharm Ata High, the masculine gender, to Sharm Ati High, the feminine gender. Once when Bade Baya took her to Patna to show her glimpses from his past, he had entertained the entire clan and, according to Paki, they had all liked her a lot. She would take great pleasure in saying, in our part of the world, in my in-laws' home, in our Patna, and when we went to Allahabad we saw the confluence of the Ganga and Jamuna just like the Shita Aleka and Diheleshwari embracing each other. Yes, just the way you embraced me. Bade Baya laughed and Paka blushed. She found Paki's blushes a little strange. In this part of the world even brides are quite assertive. Bade Baya's faith that slowly everything will settle down turned out to be correct. Sure enough, gradually, everything did settle down. Paki had not only married Bade Baya but his language, his ways, his customs and traditions had become her own. Bade Baya was so lost in Paki that he quite forgot himself, and Paki, with the greatest of ease, kept adding one person after another to the family numbers. Amma and Baba, who had initially had very little interest in her person. and had tolerated her membership of the family as an unpleasant duty, were delighted with her astonishing fecundity, and the same house that had been seen as spacious became the epitome of cramped living. 2 rooms in bungalow no. T/80 were under the exclusive control of Paki, and her little princes and princesses ruled over the remaining 3 rooms as well. 1 room had been designated the drawing room, but in name only. Its actual condition was such that a baby's dummy lay in one place and a bottle of milk in another. Someone would be clutching the divan and reciting the alphabet because there was nothing else to amuse the young master in that room. Elsewhere, Rani and baby's books were being reduced to pulp. When, for his sins, Chot Baya visited Dhaka in his vacations, his booklets and notebooks would be torn to shreds. At least she felt this way. Who was she? A slender, tawny young girl, solitary even while living in the midst of all, loving life and fragrances of all kind, courageous despite her deceptively slim being and with the ability to take on mountains if necessary. But in this house Bade Baya was no less than a mountain, and Paki, with her 7 little ones, was, as it were, its summit. And she was never able to take them on. She loved Bade Baya, whose clear and lively intelligence had encouraged her to love life and enjoy its pleasures, who valued the brighter rather than the darker side of life, and who, having once understood something, was prepared to lay down his life for it, as he was for Paki, who, in turn, had understood that for her salvation lay in creating a safe haven for themselves. So she cleaned out a small outhouse in which Amma stored odds and ends for herself, and after days of hard work sat in it weaving together her dreams and thoughts when Paki dropped in and, chatting of this and that, suddenly expressed surprise. "Don't you feel suffocated in this dark outhouse, money child?" Like Bade Baya, she addressed her as money child, although initially Paki had been her friend. It was a fact though that the friendship could not have taken on the shape that Paki's friendship with Bade Baya had assumed. Even now when she looked back she was very conscious of the transformation of Bade Baya. Bengali women are sorceresses. Don't go to Bengal. From childhood this was the burden of the songs she'd heard, and after settling here she had witnessed it. Bade Baya's marriage to Paki was a successful demonstration of Bengali magic. "Ari, Money Beta, lost in a reverie are you? Where have you disappeared to? What have I been asking you?" Paki grabbed her shoulder and shook it. She looked at Paki inquiringly without answering her. "Ari, I'm asking how you don't suffocate in this humidity." She retched. What a difference there was between that Paki and this Paki, she thought, without paying much attention to her. She had spoken in distant tones. "To make obeisance and touch feet, and now?" "Yes, this is the magic that Bengali women know." "Then how could this magic not hold sway?" She fixed her gaze on Paki, who had blossomed as a result of becoming the mother of so many children. The tresses that had reached her waist now hung well below it. With her sari tied in the way Amma tied hers and her head covered with its end, she was another being. "Oh ho, money child, for whose sake have you renounced the world and taken to this closed, claustrophobic room?" She shook her by the shoulder again. "You've really learned to talk a lot, haven't you?" "Yes, why not?" "After all, my children," she retched violently. "Oh God! This heat! My head is spinning." "You mean," she looked at Paki closely. "Really, Paki, there's no end to your fecundity. Now you're on the 8th. But pay close attention to me. This time I'm not going to vacate the outhouse for you." She finally understood what Amma had meant when she had stepped into her outhouse yesterday and exclaimed in delight, "Oh, so you've fixed this side room. It can serve a purpose in time of need." Now Paki's condition had clearly shown the need. "Put up the barricades," she thought, "otherwise you'll be driven from here as well." At that very moment Bade Baya materialized from somewhere. "No reason for you to worry, Money Beta," he said. "The visionaries will populate new communities." "How is that, Bade Baya?" "We're off to Fulberry. Enough of this place, now the village world will make our acquaintance." Bade Baya announced his decision with composure. Amma and Baba were disturbed at the very thought. "Where are you going to, sir? Is that any place to live in? It'll have a bad effect on the children's studies. There's not even a proper school there." "What are you saying, Baba?" "There are not 1 but 2 high schools there, one for the girls and another for the boys. But, son, the medium of instruction there is Bangla, and that way we'll lose our—" "So what, Baba?" "If we have to live here, we have to mingle with this soil. This will strengthen our roots," Bade Baya interrupted Baba. "You may think that, son. My experience is that grafting ourselves on this soil will not make a difference. A graft will always be seen for what it is. No, Baba. Your attitude is wrong. You can think this way, Chot Baya intervened. He was visiting Santhar from Dhaka. This was around 1958 or 1959 when arrests were taking place very quietly, and he had thought it best to come home with the least amount of fuss. The family would be pleased and at the same time the danger would be averted. Now here he was arguing with Baba with the greatest of ease. Has anyone been able to place controls on thinking, sir? If that had been possible, would I not have molded you, who are bent on reducing our traditions to dust, to my way of thinking? Our coming generations will not even know. You have no right to say that, Baba. We did not express any desire to. Come here, it was your decision. It was you who rebelled against your traditions. Now which traditions are you talking about? You tore a sturdy tree up by its roots and tried to transplant it in this soil. Why are you now fed up with this world? Why I'm fed up is my personal business. As far as coming here is concerned, I never made a wiser decision in my life. It is my belief that we will never receive salvation in the next world if the children's future has not been secured. And, son, all of you can see that you have not been losers in this respect. The self-confidence that you find within yourself and the determination to get your point of view across is the gift of freedom, a gift of this free society. To be free in name alone is no freedom, sir. Turn to your past. In the city you left behind, you will find your own brothers, listless and, despite their abilities, cowering in their shells, and then look at all of you, making such fine progress according to your individual talents. You are under a misapprehension. In this time of alienation we cannot speak openly, and you think this is true freedom? Chot Baya spoke bitterly. This military rule, what's your opinion of it? Who has told you that it is brave or clever to support this regime? Why don't you just take over the business of state? Who has stopped all of you? Baba was a government servant and not prepared to hear a word against the government of the day. What wonderful things you say, Baba. That would be like snatching sugar cane from an elephant. Is all this possible in a system where free speech has been silenced? It is best that you keep out of the debate of what is possible and what is not possible by keeping quiet. It is best for all of us this way, Baba said sternly. Even if we silence ourselves, don't you think others will raise their voices about these timely issues? I believe that even if our lips were to be sealed, the very walls would speak. But I say you should hold your tongue. Are you getting ready to go back to jail? Amma looked at Chot Baya in terror. As far as jail goes, Amma, people are being picked up every day. Only. Yesterday they took Paki's brother away. Yesterday it was his, today it may be our turn. In these times whoever has the courage to speak the truth will suffer the fate of Mansour al-Hallaj. There's no need. I don't want a Mansour or a Messiah. Look how you've disgraced me, you wretch. No one has ever been to jail in my family. As for Paki's brother, who can say anything about him, he seems to take pleasure in getting himself handcuffed. Where we come from, only hooligans and vagabonds go to jail. Like a typical mother-in-law, mother lacerated the festering boils. Excuse me, Amma ji, Paki opened her mouth in front of Amma for the first time. Maybe where you come from they are hooligans and vagabonds. Here things are quite different. It is only we who, even when handcuffed, dare to speak the truth. Fear the moment when the fury of the storm will blow away everything with it. After all, Amma had, in an extravagant statement, turned her brothers, who were reputable political workers, into hooligans and vagabonds. Paki dear, are you any less than a storm yourself? See how you are. Sweeping all that we love along with you. Understanding the delicacy of the moment, she had attempted to restore good humor to the conversation. For the moment the matter was diffused, and in a few days Bade Baya packed his belongings and went off to celebrate his new life in the outback. After his departure, Amma began to lose interest in the house, which would still resound with their voices. Baby and Rani had matriculated. Baba could have sent her off to the hostel, but to send all three was beyond his means, so he thought it best to gather all of them and move to Dhaka. It was probably around 1960 or 1961 that she graduated from college to enter university. She discovered that Chot Baya, still considered a child by Baba, was quite an important person in the university world. His ideological positions and individual way of looking at things had endeared him to all. In those days, nobody bothered who was an original resident and who was not. People were just concerned with the taste of the fruit, nobody was interested in counting the trees. While studying in college, she had felt that the roots of hatred had weakened considerably and had lost the capacity to flourish. The joy of life itself, the striving after truth and mutual trust and confidence would uproot it forever. She was convinced that as time went by, if right thinking prevailed, the positive values of life would be strengthened and the difference between resident and non-resident would disappear. The example of Chhot Bhaiya was before her. Chhot Bhaiya didn't know Bangla well, as Urdu was his mother tongue, but to share with others the voice of his conscience, he would speak broken Bangla and English, and he was not discriminated against but loved by all. When she joined the university, Chhot Bhaiya had already left, but the consciousness created by him, his words, his passion, was still alive in his followers. In all matters he was considered a friend of the underdog. In the most difficult conditions, whenever there was a ray of hope, people had complete faith in Chhot Bhaiya. The walls of hatred are falling down, she thought happily. People were naturally drawing closer to each other, and she who had felt self-conscious speaking Bangla in front of Paki was now speaking it with ease, however incorrect and broken. When Bade Bhaiya came to Dhaka on Amma's death, she saw that the extremely smart and easygoing Bade Bhaiya had disappeared. He who had been famous in the family for being well-dressed in the latest fashions was now, in the style of the quintessential Bengali butcher, attired in loose trousers, sported flowing locks and spoke Urdu in halting tones. This was the Bade Bhaiya for whom Amma had renounced life. Her only regret on her deathbed was that Bengal had swallowed up both her sons. One had been so mesmerized by the Bengali magic and absorbed in his family that he had forgotten that he was part of another family as well. The other was so fond of disentangling the tangled locks of Bengal that 6 months out of the year would be spent in jail. So Amma was among those fortunate ones who had all the luxuries in the world, but her sons turned out to be rebels, and it was not in her fate to be blessed with even a few drops of water from their hands as she lay dying. When she died, Bade Bhaiya, whose elegant Urdu and perfect pronunciation had been held up as a model by his teachers, was now, with complete ease and no embarrassment, confusing the masculine and feminine genders and talking to his children in fluent Bangla, for was that not his children's mother tongue? He had in all matters erased his identity and sought to merge himself with this land. What is all this and why is it so? Why Bangla? Why can't we get to the root of the matter, she would think, and unintentionally talk to Paki and the children in broken Bangla, and the children would smile, wondering why their aunt could not speak properly. Paki would burst into laughter and say, "Leave it. Why should you speak Bangla? I'll talk to you in Urdu." She was astonished to see that Paki's pronunciation in Urdu was now better than Bade Bhaiya's. When she expressed her surprise, Paki had smiled and said, "Why not? This is the language of my children's father." Seeing Paki's good humor and pleasing conversation, she felt the need to go and spend some time at Bade Bhaiya's home. It was a strange coincidence that whenever Amma had gone to Fulbury, she had been unable to accompany her. Sometimes she would have her exams or then Rani would, and sometimes there would be no one to take care of Chhot Bhaiya and Baba. Now was the perfect time. With Amma gone, Baba suddenly realized that Rani and baby were adults. Placing them in the care of Chhot Bhaiya, he got ready to go to Fulbury with Bade Bhaiya. This time there was no reason for her to stay on in Dhaka since she had passed her MA and was waiting to find a job. She wanted to go to Fulbury anyway. Whenever Baby and Rani had returned from there, they had brought back the fragrance of Moshe and tales of Paki's good humor and Bade Bhaiya's affluence, and for weeks they would be regaled with stories of Bade Bhaiya's comfortable and happy existence. The picture they would paint, from the hilsa fish cooking in Paki's kitchen and the opening buds of Moshe in her courtyard to the children's chatter, made her long to go there. Flowers were her weakness, especially Bella flowers, and Bade Bhaiya's obsession with gardening fanned her interest still further. Listening to these stories, she remembered the time before their move to Dhaka when they had lived in Patna, and along with Bade Bhaiya she had planted Bella flowers in their spacious courtyard. Deep in the recesses of her memory, the day stood out when Bade Bhaiya had brought the Bella saplings from school. How carefully the ground had been prepared, the pebbles separated from the earth, and when even that had failed to satisfy, it had been sifted through the sieve kept for cleaning sand. And this was how, in the full heat of the monsoon sun, dripping with sweat, the Bella saplings had been planted and received their first watering. The plants took to the soil, little buds developed, and when one day a tiny flower emerged from the pistachio bush, her small heart had thumped violently in its enclosed space. When she had told Bade Bhaiya the news, his face had lit up. It had been a moment of never-to-be-forgotten happiness. That night the plants had yielded huge baskets full of flowers in their imagination, and as they talked her eyes kept returning to the bushes in the courtyard. She felt waves of fragrance arising from the solitary flower and engulfing her tiny being until finally, in this heady state, sleep claimed her. The next day she had awoken to find the 3 doors leading to the courtyard closed and the noise of a great commotion coming from without. She caught hold of Chotbaya. "What's the matter?" "That's where the marriage party will set off," he said in flat tones and moved on, balancing his books. As their house was the largest in the neighborhood, every other day a marriage party would descend on them. She thought nothing of it as the marriage party came and left, but alas, it carried away the fragrance of flowers with it. Not only had the wretched neighbors entertained the marriage party there, but dug up the entire place so that food could be cooked, there to fill the gaping hell of their guests' bellies. The courtyard itself presented the picture of an inferno. All the plants had first shriveled and then died. She had cried her heart out. Baya, too, had looked sad, but as he was older, and a man besides, he had put a better face on it. She had, however, kicked up such a rumpus that, finally losing her patience, Amma had given her a few quick slaps. Baya had comforted her. "Let it be, money child. I'll plant a whole garden of Bella for you." The incident blew over. The house and that entire world changed at the same time. What to say of a whole garden of Bella when no one had the time to plant a single sapling? In Fulberry she saw that while Baya had not planted a separate garden, the whole courtyard was abloom, and among the fragrance of the flowers and the sounds of children's voices he was leading a very contented life. Living with Baya, she herself lost awareness that things were changing and that the gathering wings of the storm that Paki had so unconsciously feared in Santar were upon them. In her last days at university she had sensed that the gulf had widened, instead of narrowing. The waves of the Sarju were sweeping away the good times. The fire and passion in Chotbaya, whose character and actions had been a source of hope for people, had been extinguished. Despite his best efforts, relationships were ending. People were scattering. Suspicion and mistrust were creating cracks in the edifice of mutual confidence and certainty. The earlier love was now a mere legend, a time when hearts and minds were one, and on the face of this earth there was only one right and one left. Then, as time passed, the headiness of power brought changes in common objectives and paths began to diverge. She began to feel as if someone was poisoning the atmosphere and the flow of running water was being deliberately impeded and channeled in another direction. But water is water and will find its own way. She saw in its surge countless rivulets branching out. Its strong flow, which was once heading in its fullness towards truth, light and life, was dividing, dwindling, stagnating into a slush that over time would breed maggots. So people were corrupted. Obstacles were put in the way. Greed dimmed the vision and the dream. Living in Baya's world of fragrant flowers and joyous children, she had forgotten to guard against the evil eye that destroys happiness. Flowers die and their fragrance dissipates in the air. Yes, it had been a mistake to forget. Evil overpowered good. The enemy attacked with full force and man lost his humanity. Fire devoured Baya's garden. Paki, hair in disarray and fluttering like a thirsty bird, clung to each person in an attempt to save her home. When she herself regained consciousness, the garden had been reduced to ashes. She sought to find herself in that pile of ashes. She looked into Baya's open, lifeless eyes that carried pride of life and the light of confident and certain love till the very end. The eyes that had erased their own identity in the dream of a brighter tomorrow were open in amazement now. She looked at Baba, who had sought his salvation in a future for his children and who had prayed at Amma's death to be spared a burial in this land, as he had watched, in pain, her body float in waist-high water in the grave. Watching his companion's body being reduced to these straits had brought this prayer from the depths of his heart, and because it had come from the depths of his heart, God had accepted his prayer. His body was free even of the prison of a shroud. Paki's beauty had been reduced to ashes. Her tiny, unopened buds had been consumed by the flames. And she herself lacked the strength to die, so she had drunk the poison of life. The end.